Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Frank Moody. Um, I am the Education Relations for GameMaker in the United States. And today I'm just going to share a few things about GameMaker and some different ways to use game design within the classroom. Um, my own story is I began with GameMaker when I was kind of thrust into having some middle school students show up for a 6-week summer program. The blocks were rather large, about 3 hours, in which we take a break, obviously, in between. And I kind of got thrust into this last minute, so I had to find a way to keep the kids engaged, especially for a 6-week period, and they had come to learn game design. So we had normally, during the regular academic school year, we used Unreal and Unity as our game engines, but the amount of time and the learning curve with Unity and Unreal, I knew that within this 6-week block, especially with middle school students, that I wouldn't be able to do that. So I tried Scratch, and Scratch is a great building block for young students. But I found that the students themselves struggled after just one block session. So I knew I had to find something different. And I went out and found GameMaker, and this is all the way back in 2012. GameMaker made it the students were engaged. They learned rapidly and quickly because it was both visual. And then once they had learned the visual blocks and basically the mechanics of using the game engine, they could easily move into learning coding. And then I expanded on that through the years to using it even in humanities classes. And I'm going to go into a little bit of why that makes sense and how it can really fit in a lot of project-based learning. The benefits of game design are many, but I'm going to list just a few of those here today. Critical thinking. When you're building a game, you have to critically think about how your player is going to play the game. What problems you're going to have a ton of problems because you want to make everything happen. So you're going to come across these challenges where you're going to have to find ways and think critically about the best and the most efficient solutions for the challenges that you come up against. Most games you can't build on your own, so you're going to have to learn to communicate with others who may have better skills, and we'll get into that. But you have to be able to communicate. It's a natural place for kids to be building a project together. It's not a solo effort, although it can be for some. But I always had kids working in teams, and each of them finding their strengths within that. There's collaboration, obviously, because not everybody's going to agree on the same solution to every challenge they come across. Creativity, I think, is just a given. You have to be creative in a game. You're taking a story or a puzzle or a mystery, and you are putting that out to your audience within the game. And I'm sorry about that. So you're putting it back to your audience, and you're not there to tell them each step that you need to take. So you're going to have to be very creative in the ways that you present what you're presenting within your game. Time management is a huge learning curve for all of us. But game design helps you to know that I have a certain amount of time, I have to build this. And GameMaker really does make that easy for them to actually produce something that works and is playable and can prototype very quickly. And of course, problem solving. When you're building games, you're constantly coming up against, as I said, challenges that you have to solve the problem. Also, you may have someone test the game and they may react and do things that you didn't think they would do. And so they have to, it puts you in a position that you have to look at the game and the design of how you're doing it, and then how you're going to solve those problems. We do have a lot of teachers who teach game design through GameMaker. And I think that honestly, most of the feedback I always get is that the kids get in once they learn the basics of whatever level of game they're playing. They really are engaged, and we found that kids are really engaged, and they tend to focus, and it's a place where you can focus, and you have control, but you can also get results quickly. Now, teaching game design can be done in a lot of different ways. You can make a game step by step using a video or visual tutorials, and I will show you some examples of those. You can make a game step by step with a teacher leading you, in which the teacher's giving you, here are the things we're going to do. I'm going to show you how to do them, and then you're going to present them to me. And you can also make projects for students, and the beauty of all programming, I think, and the beauty especially of game engines and game designs, is you can actually open games, and this is true in all of the game engines, and you can see how someone else solved the problem. So you have just true modeling sitting right there, and you can kind of go through and try and understand their logic. Obviously, we do use game design in a lot of computer science, and GameMaker can be used to teach computer science. We have some new materials coming out. I was hoping they'd be out today, but I keep getting pushed off a little bit, I think the art department. But we do have some new materials coming out, and they have been, we've basically targeted those at the Computer Science Teachers Association's level 2 and level 3 standards aligned skills for computer science. They deal mainly with algorithms and programming and the impacts of computing. But that's not the only thing that I think we can be using game design in, and I'm going to go into a few of those right now. The first one is that all games have to have some kind of art or resources or assets in order for the game to be enticing. Those could be simple assets, but they can also be complex assets. Most of our assets within the 2D game community are generally pixel art, and students are taught pixel art at very young ages now, because it's the main entrance into digital art. So as students are doing their artwork or they're learning digital art, this is a very easy segue into them making something happen with that art, whether it's puzzle pieces or actual animation of their pixel art moving across the screen. Art is a huge part of the creation of game resources. They learn to manipulate and movement of pixel art, how pixel art moves across the screen. And again, it is the basics of digital art. Music. Again, another big part of the team is the music side. Games become enhanced when there's music resources that can bring the game to life, but also not just music, but also sound. When you pick up an object, there is a sound to that. When you're walking across a room, there is a sound to that. And students learning to manipulate music or sound resources through the computer is a really important skill for them to take on, as well as learn and have exposure to. Music is also an emotional motivator, so it helps to build drama into the game. So as part of the team, you do have to have people who can start to understand and dive deeper into these projects where they're using music and sound to make the game much more playable. I don't know if you've ever had to play games in silence, but it's really still not the same experience as if you have the full game going. And I think movies are probably the same as well. History. Game design can be used for students to look at historical events and time periods, build games and puzzles or solutions to historical events, historical interpretations, the narratives that are out there, critical choices that were made or maybe weren't made. And I think that, using game design, especially through a historical lens, reinforces cultural empathy. because they have to really truly understand the history, what was taking place at that time, and then they're bringing that history to life and using their own voices to interpret and create those narratives. So I think that, again, especially in the humanities, history is an important thing that we can bringing game design as a way of engaging students in historical events that they may not be able to do just through a book or watching a movie, which is more passive. So this active involvement in game design and history, I think, is a whole area that can open up for a lot of students that may not engage in other ways. And then we come to language. All of the games that we do, especially 2D games, will have a lot of language to them. A lot of it is text responses between characters. And in a 2D game, we can change those languages very easy, and they can be reinforcing the language skills that they're learning in a language class. So if a student's in Spanish and they're even on a game that's already built, they could be changing and interpreting the language from English into Spanish. And I think this reinforces their communication skills. Branching scenarios can reinforce those communication skills as well, in which they have to, maybe by answering one question, it leads to a branch of a whole other set of things. And GameMaker does allow you to do these in very easy ways, in which the language is more of the focus, and then the building of the tools or the engagement are not huge challenges that you have to first get over those hurdles and then you get to the language. So game design can be used within language classes really easily. And again, it's going to reinforce cultural empathy because they have to understand the culture, and they may even have to change the game or the characters in order to truly make that cultural empathy connection. GameMaker itself was developed in 1999 for education by Professor Mark Overmars. He designed it to be an easy to learn 2D game making tool. It has both a visual and a coding language. So you can do this with all drag and drop, changing what the resource numbers are through a very visual language. And then you can also do it through a coding language, which is GameMaker language. GameMaker language is not far off from Java. So we really try to use the coding language for students, especially GameMaker language. Once they learn the computational thinking and how those things flow, it's a very transferable skill to move on to Java or C#, or any of the other popular programming languages, Python, and so forth. We have about 1,700 new users that sign up every day. And we do have games from small indie games to large, very popular games like Undertale. And a lot of even the big major game developers and the AAA games will use GameMaker to prototype because it's so fast, so quick to understand whether the mechanics of your game or the scenarios that you're creating are really going to work and flow. So GameMaker is used quite a bit, and we have a large community that I'll talk about a little later. Again, it is a 2D game engine. Although you can put some 3D assets into GameMaker, we really have just tried to stay right at the 2D game engine, and that is where our real power comes in. It does have a very shallow learning curve. In fact, I'm going to show you a tutorial that you could be building an arcade game within 15 minutes, having no programming language or understanding of ever having programmed or created a game before. As I mentioned, it is visual, but it can also be code-based. This is an example of the code base versus the programming, or a code base versus a visual base. And you can see that the learning for a student, especially young students, but even older students, the learning curve is short because you have these visual blocks that can line into each other. But as you can see, you can directly look at what the code is behind that and how you would write that code in just typing out the code. Teaching game design with GameMaker, our introductory course or tutorials are on space rocks. Some of you may know it as Asteroids. It was a very popular arcade game. It gives a good introduction to GameMaker because it's a short tutorial of a complete game that you can make and play very quickly. And there's a video as well as a written tutorial, and I'm going to show you some examples of the written and video tutorial. And it uses GML visual as well as GML code versions, so you can start in either direction that you feel most comfortable. We also have some new materials that are coming out. We have a brand new educator's guide that has been redesigned. Again, it is pointed at the level 2 and level 3 skills. The educator's guide helps the teacher with ideas and examples of ways to use matching quizzes, especially in the newer stuff like Quizlet. And then the lessons are set up as to be more broken apart and rather just getting it all done at once. But students can explore through the student workbook. They can explore computational design and learn terminology along the way. So this comes from more of a classroom experience. The visual tutorials and walkthroughs are very just object oriented. It's a very clear, concise way of going with small explainers in between, and they're very easy to follow, as you can see from these examples here. I'm going to show you a short part of the video tutorial to show you that it runs smoothly and what you can expect from the tutorials made from GameMaker itself. Although we have lots of tutorials that are made by our community that are available on YouTube as well.
In this video, we are going to make a game like Asteroids in 3 simple steps. We'll start with the ship's movement, we'll work on shooting and destroying rocks, and we'll create a game loop with scoring. So let's begin. Let's open GameMaker, click on New, and select this Space Rocks template. This will give you all the images you need for your game. Then enter a name for your project here and hit Let's Go. You're now in your project in GameMaker, and in the asset browser here, you have 4 sprites or images. So that's the bullet that you fire, the ship you fly, a big rock, and a small rock. These are only images though, so let's turn them into objects that we can program to move, fly, shoot, and do whatever we want. So in the asset browser, I'll click on the objects group and then go up here and select objects. I'll turn this up to 4 and hit create. Now let's go to each object, give it a name and a sprite. I'll double click on the first one. I'll name this obj_player, so this will be the player ship. From the asset browser, I'll drag the SPR player sprite and drop it here. So we are telling GameMaker that this is what this object looks like. Then the second object, I'll name this obj_bullets and apply the SPR bullet sprite. And then the next object will be obj_rock. This will have the big rock sprite because rocks will be big by default. It's only when you shoot them that they become small. And then the final object is obj_game, and this doesn't need a sprite because it's not something that you can see in the game moving around. It's just a silent object that does its own thing in the background, and we'll be using it later in this video. So we have the objects. Let's put.
So yeah, I think you can see from that again, our tutorials from GameMaker are created to be straightforward, easy, They can be slowed down, they can be repeated. And I found that kids as young as 11 take to it very quickly, learn mechanics very quickly, and they're off and running, sometimes way ahead of the adults. We do have other tutorials and templates which allow students to create other types of games. Again, that was just an arcade style shooter game. But we have platformer games, we have puzzle games, and all of these have more in-depth tutorials. They can be longer games to complete. They also will have, if they don't already, have video and written tutorials. And some of them are all visual code, and some of them may just be GML code. And we are also working on taking some of these templates and making them so that you can just take games and they can change them and in a way modify them to make them their own game, switching out characters, switching out obviously language and things like that. Again, teaching how to individual projects. We do have short tutorials. We have area for answering frequently asked questions. And we have a great community out there that will help to support students as well in the creation of their own independent games. I think I may have missed something. No? And then we do have a lot of resources out there. We have a lot of GameMaker. We have GameMaker blogs, which talk about all kinds of things in GameMaker, from the people who are actually building games to understanding how to market your games. And we have a whole GameMaker YouTube channel as well, where some of it is built and designed by GameMaker, some of it is built and designed by our community, but we do keep a very active eye on what is uploaded. And again, we're really all about student safety. And anonymity for all of the students is a built-in security for us. So as students partake within these communities, it's just a real learning community out there for students. We also work with a lot of third-party people who make things for GameMaker. We have someone devoted just to the community working with developers. So we have plugins that, again, I talked earlier about creating narratives and dialogue and branching scenarios. I'm going to play just a little bit of video about how easy that can become with creating assets for it. So, I mean, those are just that's just a little bit of a brief take through what GameMaker can do, what game design can do in different engagement areas for students. I'm going to go into now just a little bit about how we, license GameMaker and how that goes out. Educators receive 1 seat for the GameMaker license. So it's just the 1 email. It could be a school's email address. It could be through different ways, but you receive 1 seat, and from that seat, you can use it an unlimited amount of times for your students in your classroom. We do not collect any student info. In fact, we don't even have your students signing in. You have the 1 email address, the license is there, and then your students are coming on. So all of their identity is protected, and we really are truly committed and devoted to that fact that we want to make it safe and usable for students, so that we're not trying to mine any data or even know how many of your students are there. There are 2 levels of licenses. the educator and the achiever license. The educator license obviously gives you GameMaker, access to all of our learning resources. You can export your games to GX Games and play them there, and you can also export to the desktop to play games. The Achiever license takes you up one more level. You obviously get GameMaker. You will have access to the learning resources. You get GX Games export. You get desktop exports, but you can also do web exports, mobile exports, and console exports. This includes Xbox, Nintendo, and we work with all of the major game consoles. For more information, or if you have questions about which license would work best in your situation, I would refer you to Studica, and they can answer all of those questions about the best way of licensing GameMaker for your classrooms. So in the next steps, you should keep an eye out for a follow-up email from Christy, and she will include a recording of this webinar and additional information, which will come to you. If you want more information or you have questions, again, or you would like to request a quote or to speak to a dedicated educational representative, please contact them. Then they will be always there, happy to assist you. That information is here on the slide, but I know that you'll also be getting an email from Christy. And I think I'll take it back to Christy.